Welcome into the GoVols247 Podcast. I am Ben McKee, and I am joined by Ryan Callahan on this first weekend of August edition of the podcast. A rainy Saturday here in Knoxville. Ryan and myself just made our way back home from practice. Tennessee football practice number 3 took place this morning. William Inge, the linebackers coach, spoke afterwards. There were 4 players who spoke. And we have all that coverage up at the site at GoVols247.com. Plenty of camp coverage from this first week up at GoVols247.com. Ryan and I are here to discuss recruiting because, Mr. Callahan, it has been an exceptional, I'm using that word, an exceptional week for Tennessee on the recruiting trail.
Absolutely. Started obviously Monday with Tennessee getting the big in-state commitment from Joel Wyatt, the 4-star athlete from now Oakland High School in Murfreesboro. He'd previously played at the Webb School in Bell Buckle, moved over to Oakland recently, and had originally planned to announce a decision. Both these guys who committed this week actually had planned to announce decisions the first week of July. For Joel Wyatt, it was originally going to be July 6th. He pushed things back. We heard all kinds of different things over the past month leading up to that date, and then also after, about just what he might do next and where his recruitment might go from there. And it sounded for a little while like he might wait until sometime during the season to announce a decision. And then before long, it became apparent that he was still looking to do something this summer, and then pushed it up to get it done before the end of July. But regardless, looked around a little bit. It was a Tennessee Vanderbilt battle in the end, and that's those were the only 2 schools that hosted him on official visits. So you kind of knew Tennessee was still in good shape, but you also just didn't know whether there was going to be another twist or turn in there. That we saw Oklahoma, Louisville, Mississippi State all offer him in June and July. Was someone else going to enter the picture or circle back to him that would complicate things for Tennessee? But give Tennessee credit; they stayed with him. Never backed off one bit, continued to make him a priority, and just, put to rest any concerns he might have had about his possible role in Tennessee's defense. Everyone's pretty much recruiting him as a defensive player, despite his background as a wide receiver, but Tennessee stayed with him and made it clear it was willing to give him a chance to play safety, which is what he really wants to do. He's really had some reservations about being an edge rusher, which is where Tennessee has envisioned him playing for months, but they've kind of given him the leeway to say, hey, if you want to play safety, we'll do that. And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out long term. But regardless, a top 50 prospect nationally, in state, to get a guy like that and get it done before his senior season, a huge win. And then Tennessee backs that up with an even bigger win on Thursday, going out and getting 5-star athlete. He's a 5-star in the 24/7 Sports Composite, Celesi Moa out of Ogden, Utah, beating out Utah for him. The other finalists were Michigan, Washington, and Michigan State. And he's a two-way athlete, really legitimately a two-way athlete, a bit different from Joel Wyatt in that sense, because no one's really been recruiting Wyatt as a wide receiver. Celesi Moa could easily play either side of the ball in college. And, 5-star in the 24/7 Sports Composite, top 50 player on 24/7 Sports. So this is a universally regarded elite prospect, and a guy who really, I think Brandon Huffman, one of our national analysts, said it best during the CBS Sports HQ stream of his announcement Thursday afternoon. We're not saying he's going to be Travis Hunter, but if there was anyone from this class, the 2026 class, who had the ability to play on either side of the ball or both at a high level, it would be Celesi Moa. So that kind of tells you what kind of prospect we're talking about with that type of versatility to legitimately be able to play high-level safety or wide receiver in college. That's a nice skill set to have. About 6'1", 190 pounds, so already good sized and a good athlete. Makes a lot of plays on both sides of the ball in high school. You'll continue to see him do that his senior season, I think. And for Tennessee to go out to a place like Utah, where they obviously that's not part of their normal recruiting footprint, to go out there and win a battle like that, just another feather in the cap for Kelsey Pope, who's done a really nice job at wide receiver in the past 2 classes. I think you throw in Travis Smith and Rodarius Jackson in the 2025 class, 2 guys that look like they're going to play a lot of football for Tennessee as true freshmen. Joakim Dotson also in that class that looked like a kind of an under the radar get and ended up being a really nice pickup, I think, perception wise. by the time signing day rolled around last year. And then in this class, 3 really nice wins in Tyreek King, Legend Bay, and now Celeste Moa. So Tennessee's done a really nice job at the wide receiver position. Still a big fish out there at that position that we'll talk about a little later on, but definitely a really good week for Tennessee, and two huge wins in the rankings. Obviously this is a numbers-based game when you talk about the team rankings, but Tennessee moving up this week with those 2 pickups, since they were both top 50 prospects nationally. Tennessee now in the top 10 in the 24/7 Sports Composite team rankings. So gave them a pretty big bump. They were at number 14, I think, going into the week, and now up to number 9 at one point, now back down to number 10. But Tennessee in that top 10, and a great place to be, obviously, going into the month of August. To have that done before the end of July, pretty impressive week for Tennessee. When everybody's talking about what's happening on the practice field, recruiting kind of stole the show for a few days this week.
Let's put a bow on Joel Wyatt first, and then we'll circle back to Celeste Moa. Was it as simple as making him feel comfortable about Tennessee giving him a true chance to play safety? Was that the difference? Because it seemed like that was the holdup and what caused pushing his announcement back, maybe Tennessee not being viewed as without a doubt the front runner. It seemed like that was the holdup, is whether or not Tennessee would give him a true opportunity to play safety. So the fact that Tennessee circled back and agreed to give him a true chance to play safety at Tennessee, do you think that was the simply the difference in this?
Yeah, I think that was a big factor for sure in why Tennessee won out. But I think he did take a serious look at other options. I think he wanted to kind of take a step back and just see what his options were, knowing like he kind of had reservations about the edge rusher projection at Tennessee, but he never really put his foot down and said, I'm not going to play edge. And so once he got close enough to decision day and realized he had cold feet about it, I think he decided to take a step back and say, all right, what are my other options? What if I don't go to Tennessee because of this? Where would I go? And so Tennessee, though, still looked like the favorite. And then Tennessee very quickly kind of made it clear that he had an opportunity to play safety if he picked the Vols. And so it didn't take too long, probably another week or so after he decided to push things back. By then it was pretty clear that one, it wasn't obvious that he was going to have a lot of other new options that had popped up. We were kind of interested in seeing where things might go with Oklahoma, if Louisville would make an aggressive push for him, if someone like North Carolina, which had been involved with him off and on in the spring, might circle back and be more of a player. There was talk of LSU or Georgia getting back in the picture, but I don't know that anything was ever real with either of them. They were scheduled to host him on official visits at one point, and those visits kind of fell apart. So I think the more he looked around, it just became obvious the relationships at Tennessee, the chance to stay in state, and the fact that Tennessee was then willing to play him at a position that was more comfortable to him. It all just added up. So I think he just kind of needed some time to reflect and look around and see what his options were. And when he did, I think he realized, okay, that Tennessee just makes more sense for me. And it's a school I've liked all along. And the relationships were good. Lavorne Harbin did a nice job with them, Coach Chop. Tennessee, again, had been recruiting him as an edge for months, but they, earlier in the process kind of just recruited him as an athlete. Kelsey Pope was even involved early in the process with him. So he's got good relationships with a number of guys at Tennessee, and they did a good job with him. So it was a little bit of just, making sure he was comfortable after looking around. But yeah, a lot of it was just Tennessee being willing to be flexible there and give him the chance to play a position that he knew he sees himself at long term, as opposed to, potentially putting his hand on the ground in some situations, but definitely rushing off the edge. That's just not something. He's done a little bit of that in high school, and you can see on film there's a skill set there, but I just don't think he felt comfortable with that being his primary focus in college, and he wanted to know that he had some sort of other option there wherever he went.
With Celeste Moa, I have the same thought that I had with TJ White when we recorded his commitment podcast. And that was that, yes, you have Faison Brandon, 5-star quarterback, number 1 player in the country from the state of North Carolina, not within your state. That's Tennessee's best recruiting win this cycle. But I thought TJ White was just as impressive, and you could argue that one was as impressive as any because of the talent, top 100 overall player. You recruit Mississippi fairly often, but it's not something that you live in per se to help you have success. And you're able to beat out Mississippi State, Ole Miss, the in-state schools, and I just thought that was a really impressive win, and that's how I feel about Celeste Moa as well. And top 100 overall player in the country, and really you can boil it down and say he's a top 50 overall player in the country. And as you mentioned, he's a composite 5-star. But the fact that his dad played at Utah, he's in the state of Utah, a two-parter for you, I guess. Just your thoughts on it being one of Tennessee's better recruiting wins this cycle, which, hey, good sign for Tennessee fans. They're starting to have a bunch of these in the same class where just crazy impressive recruiting wins. But in addition to that, it seems like playing in the SEC, the opportunity to play in the SEC was something that he just didn't really want to turn down.
Yeah, we've seen this before. I go back to, even the Manning family. They've had obviously the chance to play at Ole Miss was there for Peyton and Eli. Peyton didn't go that route. Arch Manning chose to go to Texas, somewhere no one in his family had any real ties. So, sometimes you have those legacy situations, and we've seen Tennessee legacies go elsewhere too. Sometimes guys want to chart their own path and not just go where their dad went or someone in their family played. And so I think he was always interested in Utah, and there was a reason they were perceived as the favorite for a long time. But Celeste Moa was clearly very intrigued by, as you said, the opportunity to play in the SEC, and referenced to me and to Blair Angulo, our West Region analyst that does a great job. Talked about playing on the big stage. I think that's where so many kids want to be in college. And these days, the Big Ten's grown, so you hear less about it being just the SEC. It's SEC or Big Ten for a lot of kids that are taking more of a national view of their recruitment. But to kids who value the SEC, it's tough to pass that up. And Celeste Moa clearly valued that opportunity and saw himself being an SEC type player. And that was always interesting to me. He kind of said similar things around the time he went to Knoxville back in June for his official visit. It was his first time on campus. And that's the other part of this. Really impressive for Tennessee to get one visit from a guy like that and make that enough to land him. It reminds me of Bennett Warren, the 4-star tackle out of Texas, where Tennessee almost didn't even get an official visit. Got the last visit in June. Next thing you know, they're beating out Michigan and Texas A&M for him. So you can see that working out in some cases. But Tennessee did a really nice job in Celeste Moa's recruitment, offered him back in November, stayed on him for months. Kelsey Pope went out to see him in I think both January and the spring when coaches were on the road. So they spent a lot of time. That's not an easy trip for an assistant coach to make. So to be sending him out there for essentially just that purpose, to see Celeste Moa and a couple others in the area, that was a sign that he was pretty important to Tennessee. So they did a really nice job recruiting him. And yeah, I think no doubt because of the area that he's from, having no ties to Tennessee or anything like that, and getting him on campus once and making that enough to win the battle. I think that is one of Tennessee's most impressive wins this cycle. I thought we revised that statement, though, Ben. I thought we decided Braden Rouse may be a slight step above the TJ White recruiting win. I give him a lot of credit for the Braden Rouse win just because Texas was swinging pretty heavily in that one at the end. You had Alabama and Michigan also among the finalists, but the fact that you've got a few to pick from there, as you said, kind of shows you that the depth of this class has become pretty strong. That's one question I had. Tennessee ended up with 17 4- and 5-star prospects in the 2025 class, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. That was a very deep class. Not a lot of fat there in that class. This class maybe not going to have quite as many 4 and 5 stars total in the end, but at the top, it's getting pretty crowded. You've got several to pick from that are in the top 100 or top 150 nationally in either the 24/7 Sports rankings or in the 24/7 Sports Composite. I look at a guy like Tyreek King that we've got as a 3-star. He's highly ranked in the 24/7 Sports Composite. So a lot of highly regarded players in this class either way you look at it, and that's why Tennessee has a top 10 class right now. But yeah, Celeste Moa, a pleasant surprise, I think, for a lot of Tennessee fans on Thursday when he announced, because I think people thought at the end of the day, can you really get a player like that from Utah? Can you really win a battle like that, especially with family connections to Utah? and he's had brothers go elsewhere. It kind of made sense that he's in hindsight that he was willing to go elsewhere. But yeah, if you told me a few weeks ago Tennessee was going to be the pick there, I would have been a little skeptical. I thought at the end of the day, Tennessee had done a nice job, but it still might be tough to win that one. We've seen that one go against Tennessee multiple times. This time they pulled it off, and give Kelsey Pope and the rest of Tennessee staff a lot of credit for making that happen.
Do you believe that Tennessee is going to give him a true opportunity to play both sides of the football? And I know you touched on this earlier, but to dig into it a little bit more, do you anticipate him playing both sides of the football as a freshman? And defensively, what position would that be?
Yeah, he the way he's made it sound, Tennessee, I think, has made it more his call about which position he wants to play, and he seems to be pretty interested in playing on offense. So that's been more the position they've recruited him to play. So I think he'll be a wide receiver to start off. That's the plan. And later on, there's the potential to maybe be a two-way player down the road as he gets settled in. I think the idea is let's not, kind of like the approach with Boo Carter, who was a two-way player out of high school. Yeah, maybe he could get a look on offense, but let's not complicate things too much for him as a freshman. So they gave him that look in spring practice earlier this year. So probably looking at a similar type thing with Celeste Moa without the question marks going into season 2, maybe. But where you could expand things for him, after a year in the program, something like that, and give him a chance to play on defense. And he, I mentioned he's about 6'1", 190 pounds, good build. Safety, I think, is the position he would likely play on defense. That's where most people think he projects in college if he were to play defense. And I mentioned the two-way element. Mike Matthews kind of had a similar background to that too, where he was a really high-level safety in high school, and Georgia and some other teams really liked him at safety and thought he had, the chance to be an NFL safety down the road. And Tennessee was one of the first teams to really start recruiting him as a wide receiver, and he always liked that idea. Similar situation here, where I don't think Celeste Moa, unlike Mike Matthews, was at all opposed to playing safety. But Utah was talking playing both sides of the ball. I think the idea of just getting the ball in his hands in a high-powered offense, I think, was exciting to him playing in the SEC. And down the road, is it something where he's going to make an issue of it if he's not a two-way player? I don't think so, but he's got an intriguing enough skill set where if Tennessee thinks he can help them there, that's an interesting element to this. We'll see if it works out down the road for him to do some of that. But seeing how they've approached it with Mike Matthews, you've not heard a word about him playing safety at Tennessee. It could easily go that way too with Celeste Moa. But the fact that you've got that option and always have the fallback plan of, hey, if it's not working out at receiver, approach him about a move to safety. That's where it's nice to have that versatility. If for some reason one position doesn't click, you've got another position to fall back on. Celeste Moa has a skill set that easily could project to either side. So if you had a need at safety or anything like that, you could always approach it down the road and look at it that way and see if he's open to it. But yeah, he's got a really nice skill set and has made a lot of plays on both sides of the ball. And I think could be a pretty high level player in college at either one, just depending on what he wanted to do. And it sounds like he wants to play receiver a little bit more.
There are several more ongoing recruiting storylines for Tennessee, and we will discuss those on the other side of this quick timeout here on the GoVols247 Podcast. Welcome back into the GoVols247 Podcast. I am Ben McKee, and I am joined by Ryan Callahan on this first weekend of August edition of the podcast, talking Tennessee football recruiting because it has been a very fruitful and busy week. We do have a bit of bad news to discuss, and we will do so here in just a moment. But first, I do need to encourage you, wherever you find your GoVols247 podcasts, if you wouldn't mind going in and leaving us a review, that would help us in a big way, and we would greatly appreciate that. And these are also being recorded for video purposes and being posted on our YouTube page as well. So if you can go find us on YouTube at GoVols247, subscribe to the channel where you'll find all of our podcasts. If you prefer to watch the podcast instead of listen, you can look at my mug for some strange reason, or come to look at Ryan's pretty face with a beautiful backdrop of Neyland Stadium. You can watch it on there. There's player interviews that we are uploading daily from camp, assistant coach interviews, Patrick, myself, and Ryan on our no huddles that we record. And then, of course, as we get into basketball and baseball season, there's similar content in that regard as well. So if you wouldn't mind, going and subscribing to the channel, and then leaving us a like, a dislike, a review, whatever you would prefer on the video. We would greatly appreciate that as well. Ryan, as I mentioned, it hasn't been all good news for Tennessee this week on the recruiting trail, although this one, I guess because it's been in the works for quite some time, and we've been following this storyline for quite a while now, it doesn't really feel like a loss. And again, I think that's because a lot of people have just assumed that Carson Sneed was not going to be a part of Tennessee's class. But I also don't know that he's the best fit for what Tennessee has been bringing in at tight end the last couple of classes to begin with.
Well, yeah, in a way he is, and in a way he's a little bit different. You know, they've kind of had a blend of different tight ends that they've brought in. You've got a guy like Jack Van Dorselaer that's maybe a little more like Carson Sneed, but probably a bit more of a balanced tight end. Carson Sneed, you know, I think a lot of guys see him as more of a traditional tight end, where he's going to be that inline guy, can be a really good blocker. He's even played some tackle in high school. You know, pretty athletic too, but is already started to fill out his frame really nicely. So he kind of would be more of, I think, that Miles Kitzelman type tight end that Tennessee has right now. And to your point, they've gotten some athletic pass catchers like Deshaun Brame and Ethan Davis to go along with them. So they've tried to bring in a blend of tight ends, a little bit of both. And Sneed would probably be more of that inline tight end, a traditional guy, but wants to be in an offense that's throwing the ball to the tight end a good bit. So that was something that he really looked into pretty heavily over the past several months. And during his official visit to Knoxville, really wanted to hear about his possible role there. But, you know, to your point, I think a lot of people had assumed that he was going to end up elsewhere. At times, though, it didn't look like that was for sure going to happen. You know, coming off his visit for 865 Live at Tennessee back in late May, there were some pretty good vibes about Tennessee's chances of holding on to Carson Sneed at that time. Coming out of his official visit to Knoxville in June, they got the last visit. Still looked like there was a pretty decent chance Tennessee was going to hang on to him, but it just seemed like a situation where he kept looking for something else. He kept wanting something to make the fit at Tennessee seem more comfortable. And his brother, Dayton Sneed, transferring from Tennessee to North Carolina earlier this year after spring practice, was always something that I thought was going to complicate this for Tennessee in the end. They're pretty close and really liked the idea of playing together in college. Even though Carson Sneed grew up dreaming of playing for the Vols, I think the dream of playing with his brother in college maybe just as big to him as the chance to play at Tennessee. So once he went to North Carolina, I think that complicated things. He also took official visits to Ole Miss and Florida at different times. Each of those schools looked like a legitimate threat to Tennessee. So it just seemed like he was always interested in something else beyond Tennessee, and there was always something that kind of kept him doubting Tennessee a little bit in the back of his mind, at least over the past 6 months or so. He went to Miami and a bunch of places on visits over the past 6 months. So he just kept looking around, stayed committed officially for almost a year before finally flipping to North Carolina on Friday afternoon. And, you know, the Tar Heels, again, that was the school. Once they landed Dayton Sneed, I thought they might make the most sense for him in the long run if Tennessee didn't just make an all-out push to keep him. And to your point, I think it's a situation where still, you know, Carson Sneed's an in-state player that sure you'd like to keep in-state, but I think Tennessee's going to be fine. They brought in some good tight ends in the past couple classes. They signed 2 in the 2025 class, with Jack Van Dorselaer and Deshaun Brame. Those were both 4-star prospects. Brame was a top 100 player nationally, really good prospect. So you're okay there. And Tennessee, just hours before Carson Sneed announced his decommitment and his decision to commit to North Carolina, Tennessee offered Lincoln Watkins a Kentucky commitment from Michigan that had been on the Vols' radar even before Carson Sneed took his official visit to Knoxville in June. There was talk multiple times of an unofficial visit to Tennessee happening. It never did before he committed to Kentucky, but sounds like there's going to be likely an in-season visit scheduled to Tennessee. We'll see if that happens as planned, but that looks like the best option out there for right now at the tight end position in the 2026 class. If for some reason Tennessee struck out, you could always go to the transfer portal there. You know, they're not in a desperate situation where they have to go get somebody in the 2026 class. At the same time, the tricky part of getting a guy to the transfer portal is those guys usually want to play. And next year, you're probably going to have Ethan Davis and Desan Brame and Jack Van Dorselaer and maybe even Cole Harrison all expecting to play. So a high school tight end might make more sense, but we'll see how things go from here with Lincoln Watkins and if they find anybody else at that position this fall. But much better for this to happen in early August as opposed to later on down the road. You've got 4 months now to reassess and make sure. They lost Jonathan Eccles, the longtime commitment, in December. That was a much more complicated situation for Tennessee to go out and try to replace him. They ended up getting Cole Harrison in that class, but not an ideal situation to deal with that kind of scramble mode they had there at the end. This one, you got 4 months to sort of figure it out. So I think Tennessee will be fine. And Carson Sneed, again, not a guy that I would say is the most explosive tight end in the passing game. So if you're looking for a Desan Brame or Ethan Davis type, he's probably not that. But I think a guy that still could have been a good fit in Tennessee's offense, and being an in-state player, sure, you would have liked to keep him. But I think it's certainly a loss Tennessee can recover from, and not a guy that was a defining piece of this class where it's a huge loss for the Vols.
Been a very busy week for Tennessee recruiting, as we have detailed. But the ironic part of it, Ryan, is that all the news and developments that we're discussing, it's not centered around what has kept social media or the message boards a buzz of late. All the Tennessee recruiting talk has been about Savion Hyder and Tristan Keys, and not as much Darius Gray. He seems to be going elsewhere, whether that be LSU or South Carolina. But Tennessee did host him on visits and has been recruiting him for a long time. And it seems the writing on the wall is that he is going to go elsewhere. So a lot of Tristan Keys talk and Savion Hyder talk the last several weeks. Where do you think Tennessee is at with both of those guys, as at least one of them is set to make a decision here in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, Savion Hyder, we know his commitment date is set for August 19. I'll go ahead and tackle this from the start because I've heard Tennessee fans who picked up on this as well as Michigan fans. Yes, that is Bryce Underwood's birthday, the Michigan quarterback. I don't know that is why Savion Hyder is announcing his decision that day. They took photos together during Savion Hyder's official visit to Michigan. They've got a relationship that's not a I don't think the deciding factor in that one either way, but I mean, yeah, that's one of the guys that he has a relationship with at Michigan. I think it's much more of a factor that's when school starts at his school and he wants to announce his decision around friends and teammates, as a lot of players do. And so the chance to wait until the school year started and do that was important to Savion Hyder. And so he's announcing on August 19. So we're less than 3 weeks out now, and we'll see where that one goes the next couple of weeks. But I think Tennessee has a real shot in that one. I think Tennessee fans have been well aware that the Vols have been right in the thick of that one for a while. But nationally, it seems like a lot of people have been sleeping on Tennessee in this recruitment, kind of like with Celeste Moa. Frankly, I think in some ways we probably didn't even play up Tennessee's chances enough in that one because he was from Utah. Because you see those types of battles go against Tennessee sometimes when you're out across the country trying to battle for a guy like that who's mostly looking at options closer to home. But definitely in the Savion Hyder recruitment, it seems like the perception for months has been that he's likely headed to Michigan. And I don't know. I mean, that may end up being true. We'll see. But I think there's real reason to think Tennessee has a legitimate shot at landing Savion Hyder. It's a big time battle down the stretch. I think both schools feel good about their chances if you ask them today. But he and his family keep things close to the vest. They don't like when information gets out. When it does, you've seen Savion Hyder try to refute information himself on social media. He's not done any interviews, to my knowledge, in recent months. His mom spoke for him in an interview this spring with 24/7 Sports. So they're keeping it pretty quiet, and that'll lead to a lot of speculation. But I think Tennessee has done a pretty good job in that one and has a real shot. And the Vols are kind of all in on him. Michigan is too. He's the number one player on their board, regardless of position, supposedly. But for Tennessee, he's their only option at running back right now. If they don't get Savion Hyder, they're looking around for running backs this fall and potentially getting one out of the transfer portal if nothing surfaces. Just kind of the way it played out. They didn't plan to go all in there, but he's the only one they hosted on an official visit. So if they don't get him, they're looking.
Are you aware of the relationship between Savion and Faison Brandon? Any word on their relationship?
Yeah, there's a relationship there. Faison Brandon has been involved in recruiting Savion Hyder. Faison Brandon was back in town after going to the Elite 11 finals. He came back to Knoxville that weekend to spend some time around the official visitors, and Hyder was one of the guys he wanted to spend some time with. Some receivers that he'd been recruiting the previous weekend were important, but certainly Hyder and some others that last weekend were important for him to see too. So there's definitely a relationship there. I think it's you've heard a lot more about the relationship between Tristan Keys and Faison Brandon, and with good reason. I think those guys have hooked up every time Tristan Keys has been to Knoxville over the past year, and the chance to team up with Faison Brandon is at least of interest to Tristan Keys, to where that's worth noting. With Hyder, that it's not been talked about a lot, but again, Hyder's not said anything publicly in recent months to really comment on it. But yeah, I think it helps that Tennessee has the number one player in the country at the quarterback position committed, and they're certainly involved there. But yeah, so there have been reasons to think, Michigan looked like the favorite going into this calendar year. They've hosted him on multiple visits. He likes it up there, and no doubt Michigan's made him a priority. But I think Tennessee's done a really good job with Hyder too. So that one, it could legitimately go either way because they've played things so quietly, and both schools feel good about their chances. Nothing would surprise me in that one, but there is legitimate reason. If you told me Tennessee, if you told me 3 weeks from now, Tennessee got Savion Hyder, I'd say, that's not a shock. That's completely believable at this point that it could go that way. So that's one really worth tracking the next 2.5 weeks, and we'll obviously be keeping people updated as that date gets closer. Darius Gray, as you mentioned, announcing August 22nd. Tennessee's still battling there. Not as much reason to think that he's going to end up at Tennessee compared to South Carolina and LSU, as you mentioned, but we'll see if anything changes there. The Vols have hosted him on like 6 or 7 visits throughout his recruitment. He's been to Tennessee a bunch, but he's been to South Carolina even more, and LSU has made a big push for him the past few months. So it would be a bit of an upset at this point if Tennessee won that one. And then Tristan Keys, as you referenced, that one's interesting because he's another guy, has not said a lot publicly. He talked after his visit to Tennessee. He's spoken in recent months, and he has said good things about Tennessee and kept things open. Visited Miami, visited Texas A&M, visited Tennessee, in addition to LSU. But there have been some ebbs and flows in that one, and he's not said anything about a timeline. We don't know exactly when he's announcing a final decision, what his plans are, and most people close to that recruitment would tell you no matter what he decides this summer, that one's not going to be over till signing day. And that very well may be the case. But there clearly has been some reason for optimism on Tennessee's end. I think that was the case back in June after his official visit to Knoxville, for that matter. He ends up going to LSU the next weekend, and things kind of momentarily at least seem to calm down. So we'll see. That this one's kind of a roller coaster ride of a recruitment, and you're going to have some ebbs and flows in those types. And all we can say at this point is Tennessee is very much in it, and I think has had some momentum lately. Will it stick? Will Tennessee actually be able to flip him? Whether it's soon or later, only time will tell. But Tennessee has done a very good job in Tristan Keys' recruitment. Kelsey Pope has stayed on him, never gave up for 1 second after he committed to LSU this spring. People were kind of miffed at the time that he would commit to LSU because he'd been to Tennessee about 10 days earlier and had a great visit. Was in town for multiple days, really enjoyed himself, has liked himself at Tennessee, has liked his experience at Tennessee every time he's been, and has that good relationship with Faison Brandon that we talked about. So there have been multiple reasons for months to think Tennessee has a real shot, and yet the Vols never gave up, just kind of kept chopping wood, and they got him on campus for an official visit, really enjoyed himself there. And the longer this one goes, Tennessee's not going away. Texas A&M is the other school you're hearing a lot about right now. They're not going away. So I would still say there's a better chance he doesn't end up at LSU than that he sticks with the Tigers. And beyond that, we'll kind of have to wait and see. But if he were to make a decision anytime soon, and again, that's it's anyone's guess what he will do and how he will play this. But if he made a final decision, decide to flip anywhere this summer, it could very possibly be Tennessee. That would not surprise me at all if Tennessee was the choice if he does something this summer. But again, it wouldn't shock anyone if he decides to just wait through the fall and make a final decision later, because it's a big time battle and may go all the way to signing day.
Anything else that Tennessee fans need to be aware of in regards to Tennessee football recruiting, aside from the trio of 5 stars that we could see decisions from this month?
Yeah, we touched on Lincoln Watkins. That we'll kind of see where things go at the tight end position. Tennessee's still not done on the offensive line. That's one thing we'll kind of be waiting to see. Does anything surface with any interior offensive lineman if Darius Gray does go elsewhere? And then Brody Smith, locally, the offensive tackle at Maryville High School, still in play for Tennessee, has not announced a decision yet. Has been waiting to take his final 2 official visits to North Carolina and NC State that were scheduled for June. Didn't happen because of an illness in the family over the summer. So he's going to reschedule those, or already has maybe rescheduled those for sometime in September. And then we'll start working toward a decision there. But Tennessee's still very much in play with Brody Smith. And so he could be an option. And then obviously we're still waiting to see what Tennessee's going to do with edge rushers. One possibility that surfaced recently was a guy who was originally in the 2027 class, Andrew Rogers. He's at Grimsley High School in Greensboro, North Carolina, where he's now a teammate of Faison Brandon. Went to Tennessee for the Big Orange Barbecue back in late May and has since reclassified from the 2027 class to the 2026 class. He already has an official visit to Tennessee scheduled for late November for the Vanderbilt game. So we'll see where that one goes. That's an interesting development. Complicating that one is that he, much like Darius Gray, is already scheduled to announce a commitment on August 22nd. So Tennessee wasn't in his top 5 in June. I think that would probably be a different group if he put one out today, but that's an interesting layer to this too. So just sort of an odd recruitment where he's reclassified. He's got a top 5. He's probably got a school in mind right now because he has a commitment date set, but he's also planning to take official visits after that. So long way from being done in that one. So Tennessee looking for an edge rusher in this class. He's a really interesting option now with a connection to Tennessee as Faison Brandon's teammate. And then you still got Hezekiah Harris, the Auburn commitment, who has planned to take things into the fall all along. Will probably be back at Tennessee for a game day visit at some point. And then we'll see if Tristan Gibbons, the 5-star Texas A&M commitment from the state of Georgia, will end up making it back to Tennessee at some point. The Vols were the runner-up to Texas A&M at the time he committed in June, and certainly haven't given up on him since then. So those are kind of the main names to watch right now, and we'll see where else they go this fall. There are almost always some new names that pop up. Not a whole lot of needs left in this class with 22 commitments, but Tennessee's still looking around and will continue to, as they do every year. Defensive line, I should mention J.J. Finch, an Alabama commitment that picked the Crimson Tide over Tennessee in June. I think Tennessee will continue to recruit him. And then we'll see if some other targets surface on the defensive line or they circle back to some other guys. They certainly could use another defensive lineman in this class if they can get one as well.
And it's a great time to sign up for GoVols247 for all the latest in recruiting that you will be providing as the weeks progress.
Yeah, not just that. Definitely lots of good stuff on the team side of things as well. Patrick Brown's practice observations, and you'll be writing those tomorrow, Ben, are worth the price of admission alone. And right now, $1 for the first month, or with our current sale, 50% off your first year is all you have to pay to join the site. So for half price, you can get in on the action and get your coverage throughout the season, all the way through signing day and into the transfer portal season next year and all of that for a great price. So perfect time to join the site. Lots of coverage at GoVols247.com. And as we touched on here, some big names to track in the month of August as guys move closer to their senior seasons. Some important decisions coming up. Certainly Savion Hyder, one we're watching closely and still keeping a close eye on Tristan Keys as well, in addition to those other guys, to see where Tennessee goes to finish out this class. But those big names are obviously going to define how good this class can be for Tennessee. Frankly, whether they end up staying in the top 10 or not. If they don't land another big name at some point, they may have a tough time staying in the top 10. They had one more of those types. If they had one of Tristan Keys or Savion Hyder, they're probably going to end up with a top 10 class, or at least there's a good possibility of that. So big deal, and certainly names that will change the way this class has looked if Tennessee is able to land one or both of those guys. So we'll be watching them closely and have it all covered for you at GoVols247, and be sure to get VIP access to get all of our coverage leading up to those guys' commitments.
For Ryan Callahan, I'm Ben McKee. This has been another edition of the GoVols247 Podcast.